A crying little girl begs a young billionaire to be her dad until her mom comes back, and what he finds out is shocking. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and comment where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The sound of trains filled the late afternoon at Penn Station in Manhattan, where executives, students, and tourists rushed through the same crowded corridors under the harsh overhead lights. Amid the predictable movement, Nathan Cole crossed the main hall with his usual stride measured, composed, perfectly aligned with the dark suit he wore and the routine of someone who would spend years building his fortune with almost surgical precision. At 38, Nathan was the face behind a financial empire with offices on 3 continents. He made decisions that could shift the fate of entire companies, lived in an Upper East Side apartment with a view of the East River, and was often invited to events that required formal attire and discretion. But none of those titles or accolades followed him as he left work that evening. What weighed on him wasn't something a late-day coffee could fix. It was an emptiness he no longer had words for. And in the middle of that rush of people, he felt a gentle tug, almost pleading for attention. It wasn't a direct approach, not a shove, just a subtle pull at the hem of his coat, shy but persistent. Nathan stopped. The corridor kept moving. Around him, people brushing past as if nothing had happened. When he looked down, he found the source of the tug, a little girl no older than 6. Her hair was tied unevenly, her face streaked with dust and the remnants of dried tears. She wore an old dress, frayed at the edges and far too big for her small frame. Clutched tightly in her arms was a cloth doll with stitched eyes and one leg poorly mended. Her face was puffy from crying, and her red eyes locked onto his as if she already knew who he was, as if she was expecting something from him he couldn't imagine he had to give. Nathan glanced around, looking for an adult who might be with her. Nothing. Passersby glanced their way and kept walking. No one stopped. The girl took a breath and, in a tiny voice, as if afraid the sound might scare someone off, said, "Can you be my dad?" "Just until my mom comes back?" Nathan froze. It took a few seconds for him to be sure he'd heard her correctly. "What?" he asked, not because he didn't understand, but because he couldn't believe it. She lowered her eyes and hugged the doll tighter to her chest. Regret was already written all over her face. Logic told Nathan he should call security, follow protocol, get social services involved. There were trained professionals for situations like this. But something about that moment held him there. Maybe it was her vulnerability, or the way she clung to the doll like it was her last tie to whatever she once called home. He knelt down. "Where's your mommy?" he asked. She whispered, "She died." Nathan's throat tightened. "And your daddy?" She shook her head. "I don't know. It was just me and her." He stood there in the middle of the busiest train station in New York, at a loss. "What's your name?" he asked, trying to buy time. "Sierra," she said. "But my mom called me Sissy." She was shivering. The dress was far too thin for the cold that swept in through the open doors. Nathan noticed she didn't have a coat. Her legs were scraped, and her socks were mismatched and slipping. "Are you hungry?" She gave a small, timid nod. "How long have you been here?" "Since yesterday, I think." "I stayed over there," she said, motioning with her chin toward one of the columns. "A lady gave me water, but she said I couldn't stay." Nathan looked around again. He couldn't bring himself to walk away. "Let's get something to eat, okay?" She didn't answer. "I promise I won't leave you alone. This time." She reached out and took the hand he offered. And that was how it all began, with a simple question, and a gesture that seemed small but would change both of their lives forever. The car moved through the downtown avenues, its headlights reflecting off the windows of tall buildings, blending the city's amber glow with the darkening sky. Nathan had asked the driver to stop at a small restaurant near Bryant Park, a quieter spot, away from the chaos of the station. Sierra didn't ask where they were going. She sat still, her feet swinging slightly in the passenger seat, her cloth doll held tightly in her arms. Nathan's coat was wrapped around her small body, creating an image he was still trying to process. It felt like her presence had pushed aside every priority he thought mattered just hours earlier. The car pulled up in front of an unassuming entrance marked by a red awning and warm wooden interior. Nathan stepped out first, opened the restaurant door, and motioned for her to follow. Sierra hesitated for a second, but then walked toward him silently. Inside, the restaurant was nearly empty. Just two couples seated at distant tables, a woman reading alone in the corner, and a bored waiter near the bar. Nathan requested a table. In the back, near the window, where the street noise was muffled. He settled Sierra across from him and waited until she was comfortable before calling the waiter over. When the menu arrived, she looked at him with a mix of curiosity and fear of choosing the wrong thing. Nathan gave her a soft smile. "You can pick whatever you want. It's okay." She pointed to a hot chocolate and a simple pasta with red sauce. He nodded and placed the order. Then he fell silent. She still hadn't said a word since they walked in. She was alert but no longer carrying the same weight. When the drink arrived, she held the cup with both hands and brought it slowly to her lips. The warmth seemed to comfort her. Her body relaxed a little. Her eyes met Nathan's. "Are you going to leave me here after?" she asked plainly. The question hit him harder than any high-stakes negotiation he'd ever faced. He didn't answer right away. He just watched her face for a moment, trying to understand what she really needed to hear. "Not now," he said finally. "You're coming with me, and then we'll figure it out together." Sierra lowered her eyes to her cup and nodded, as if that temporary promise was enough for now. When the food came, she ate slowly, unhurried, always holding the doll with one arm. Nathan paid attention to the little things, the way she placed the napkin in her lap, her effort to not spill the sauce, the silence that felt more like habit than shyness. He couldn't stop thinking about how it had all started. There was no logical explanation, just a deep sense that he needed to protect her, even if he didn't know how. After dinner, they returned to the car. The night moved on, and the city stayed in its usual rush, but inside that vehicle, the atmosphere had shifted. Nathan asked the driver to take them to his building. The apartment was in a sleek glass and steel tower, surrounded by private gardens and featuring a discreet entrance. Sierra took in everything quietly, without questions. When the car stopped, he stepped out and opened the door for her. "Do you want to come up with me?" She simply gripped her doll tighter and got out. In the lobby, the doorman gave Nathan a subtle nod. He returned the gesture and led the girl to the elevator. They rode up to the top floor. Inside the apartment, Sierra stopped at the entrance. Her eyes scanned the modern furniture, the wide windows, the black and white framed prints on the walls. It was all too clean, too big, too quiet for her. "You can take your shoes off if you'd like," Nathan said, walking toward the open kitchen. "I can see you're cold." She didn't answer, just stood there, frozen. Her face showed exhaustion, but also uncertainty. Nathan approached her. "Are you scared?" She gave a nearly imperceptible nod. "It's too big here." He understood. For a child used to small spaces and the constant presence of just one person, this place could easily feel overwhelming. "Want to see another room?" She nodded again. He led her to one of the guest bedrooms. It was simple, just a bed with a gray quilt, a bedside lamp, and an empty dresser. Sierra stood in the doorway, still clutching her doll. "You can sleep on the couch if you'd prefer," he offered. "The living room is brighter at night, and there are blankets." The girl simply nodded. Nathan prepared the couch with a soft throw and a low pillow. He left a glass of water on the side table and returned to get her. Sierra sat down slowly, her eyes scanning the room. She looked exhausted, but there was still a question lingering. "Would you like a warm bath?" he asked gently. She looked at him, then at the doll. "She can go with you," he assured. She thought for a few seconds and nodded. Nathan showed her the bathroom and left the door slightly ajar. He laid out clean towels, set out the liquid soap and shampoo on the sink. When she stepped inside, he walked away. He waited in the living room, listening for the sound of running water. He felt the weight of the day but didn't want to sleep. When she returned, freshly bathed and still wearing the old dress, since there were no other clothes, yet he felt a pang in his chest. "Tomorrow we'll get you new things, okay?" Sierra just curled up on the couch, pulling the blanket over herself. The light stayed on her choice. When Nathan asked if she needed anything else, she shook her head. "Good night, sissy." And for the first time since that strange night began, she replied, "Good night, Nathan." Morning light streamed gently through the wide windows of the penthouse, casting geometric shadows across the polished wooden floor. Nathan had been up for a while. He had made coffee in the kitchen, warmed some milk, and left out a box of cereal. He didn't even remember buying maybe a forgotten gift from a past guest. He sat at the table with a mug in hand, trying to resist the urge to check his emails. The phone screen stayed dark next to him. A few minutes later, the soft sound of small footsteps echoed down the hallway. Sierra appeared, her hair messy and her eyes still half closed, wearing the same dress from the night before. The doll was still in her arms. Nathan got up slowly and pulled out a chair. "Good morning," he said casually. She responded with a small nod and sat down, glancing around as if to make sure she was still welcome. He poured cereal into a bowl and added milk carefully. Then he sat across from her, watching her reserved movements. Sierra ate slowly, holding the spoon with one hand while the other stayed in her lap, guarding the doll. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It held questions that didn't yet have a place to be asked. Nathan leaned back in his chair. "We could go out today. Get some clothes, shoes, the things you need." Sierra looked up, surprised. "Why?" The question wasn't defiant, just curious. "Because you deserve to have things of your own." She didn't reply, just looked down at the bowl, processing the idea. After a few seconds, she murmured, "The lady in my mom's building said I'd have to wear used clothes." Nathan sat in silence for a moment. "Today we'll pick out new ones. Ones you like." A little after 10, the car was waiting for them at the building entrance. Nathan had ordered a vehicle with a child seat and enough room for all the bags he knew they'd end up with. Sierra stepped out alongside him, clutching her doll, her eyes alert to everything around her. She got into the car cautiously, but without the same tension as the night before. On the ride to the store, she looked out the window with curiosity. She watched the traffic lights, the signs, and the people hurrying past with their coffee cups. When they arrived at the shopping center, Nathan opened the door for her. Sierra stepped out, holding her doll tightly. They walked together through the still quiet corridors until they reached a large department store. A polite store clerk welcomed them and guided them to the kids section. Nathan, a little lost, explained what they were looking for. The experienced clerk showed them racks of coats, dresses, shoes, and sets. Sierra stopped in front of a row of t-shirts and reached for a lilac one with a small star print. She gently touched the fabric. "Do you like that one?" Nathan asked. She gave a subtle nod. "Then we'll take it. And you can pick more. Whatever you want." The girl started moving slowly between the racks, selecting a pair of jeans, a thicker dress, and Velcro sneakers. With each choice, she looked to Nathan for confirmation. And every time he said, "Of course," her eyes seemed to light up. They went to the fitting rooms together. The clerk helped them with sizes. Sierra tried on a pair of jeans that fit her thin frame and came out wearing a new top. She looked at herself in the mirror quietly. Nathan watched from a distance, seeing her run her fingers over the fabric like she was making sure it was real. "It looks nice," he said. Sierra gave a small smile and went back into the fitting room. After the clothes, they headed to the hygiene aisle. She picked out a sparkly purple toothbrush, a colorful bottle of liquid soap, and a pack of hair ties. Their last stop was a bookstore. Nathan grabbed a hardcover notebook and a case of colored pencils. "Do you like to draw?" She nodded. At the food court, Nathan suggested they eat before heading home. Sierra chose spaghetti with tomato sauce and apple juice. While eating, she said softly, "My mom made it like this." But sometimes everything stuck together. Nathan smiled. "That's how you know it's good." She kept eating, chewing slowly. When they finished, they tossed their trash and headed back to the car. Sierra leaned her head against the window, wearing her new coat with the shopping bag in her lap. The city buzzed on, but inside that car, everything felt lighter. As if, for the first time in days, she felt safe enough to close her eyes for a moment. When they arrived at the building, Nathan thanked the driver and helped Sierra out of the car. She held the doll in one arm and the shopping bag in the other. She didn't say anything, just stepped into the elevator with him, as if she already knew the way. Once inside the apartment, she walked to the living room, set the bags down on the couch, and sat. The doll rested beside her. Nathan watched. "Want to put your things away in the room?" She nodded. She carried the hygiene items to the bathroom, set the toothbrush in a cup by the sink, and lined up the bottles like decorations. Then she went to the guest room and began folding the clothes, organizing each item by type with care. Nathan stayed by the door, not interrupting. When she turned to him, she asked casually, "Are you working today?" He took a breath. "No, not today. Today I'm staying here." She didn't say anything, but she sat on the carpet, opened the notebook, took the pencils out of the case, and started to draw. And for a moment, the house seemed to find a new rhythm to breathe. The late afternoon settled in quietly, casting a warm golden light through the penthouse windows and bringing with it a silence that no longer felt unfamiliar. Nathan was in the kitchen, preparing something light, while Sierra worked on her second drawing of the day, sitting cross-legged on the living room rug. Her doll was beside her, like an official companion. Colored pencil lines formed little houses, trees with rounded tops, and two recurring figures, a child in a dress and someone in a suit, always drawn with the same subtle smile. Nathan watched from a distance. When she looked up, he pointed to the table. "Are you hungry?" She stood slowly, tucked her pencils into their case, and walked over as if that seat had already become hers in some quiet, unspoken way. The meal was simple grilled cheese sandwiches and grape juice in clear glasses. Sierra bit into the sandwich carefully, then said after a few moments, "We didn't eat like this before. Mostly rice and eggs, and sometimes ... just bread." Nathan listened silently. No correcting, no comments. He just let her speak, if she wanted to. When they finished eating, she pushed the plate aside, wiped her mouth with a napkin, and asked casually, "Do you work every day?" He gave a faint smile. "I used to. Now, I'm learning how to slow down a little." She seemed to accept the answer without rush. She walked back to the living room and sat on the couch. This time, she didn't reach for her notebook. She just sat, knees drawn up, eyes wandering quietly around the apartment. Nathan followed and sat in an armchair nearby. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was a kind of shared presence, as if both knew they didn't need to fill every space with words. Nathan grabbed the remote and turned on the TV, keeping the volume low. A documentary about the ocean was playing images of underwater life flickering across the screen. Sierra watched without blinking, as if the deep-sea colors had the power to soothe. After a few minutes, she leaned into the armrest and pulled the blanket up to her waist. The doll was nestled between her arms. "Are you sleeping here again?" "Tonight?" Nathan asked. She nodded. "The room's nice, but it still gives me the creeps." He didn't push. He just stood, turned off a few lights, and left the floor lamp on. "If you need me, I'm in the room next door." "Will you leave the door open?" "Always." She nodded and closed her eyes right there, without hesitation. Nathan lingered in the living room for a few more minutes, simply watching. Then he went to bed, though sleep didn't come right away. The image of her curled up on the couch, calm after days of uncertainty, lingered in his mind. He had already made a decision without even realizing it. He wouldn't leave that girl alone again. In the middle of the night, a soft sound woke him. He went to the living room and found Sierra awake, sitting with her feet on the floor and her face hidden between her knees. "I had a bad dream," she said without looking up. "It was about my mom." Nathan sat beside her, not touching. "Do you want to talk about it?" She shook her head. "I just wish she would come back." Nathan swallowed hard. "I think she loved you very much." Sierra looked at him for a brief moment, then lay down again. "Can I leave the TV on just really low?" "Of course." And he stayed there until she drifted back to sleep. The next morning, the house felt lighter. Sierra walked into the kitchen wearing one of her new outfits, her hair tied into a messy ponytail. "Good morning," she said, her voice still sleepy. Nathan had already set the table. Cereal, warm milk, and fruit cut into neat little cubes. "Did you sleep well?" "I think so." She ate slowly, no rush, and at one point asked, "Are you going to take me to school someday?" Nathan paused. "Have you ever been to school?" "No. My mom said I'd go when I turned 6. "And how old are you now?" "I turned 6 last month." He nodded, mentally noting one more piece of the puzzle. "We can figure it out together. But it doesn't have to be today." She gave a small smile and kept eating. When she was done, she washed her bowl, dried it with a dish towel, and placed it back where it belonged, without being asked. The kind of gesture that speaks louder than any long conversation. Later, Nathan called a trusted lawyer. He explained the situation, asked for guidance, and wrote down the first steps to take. At the same time, he quietly researched the legal process for temporary guardianship. He wasn't sure if that would be the final path, but he knew he had to do something. Sierra spent the rest of the morning drawing in the living room. She made 2 more pictures in her notebook and taped one of them to the fridge. In small letters, she wrote, "Me and Nathan." He saw it after lunch and stood there for a few seconds, just looking at it. Her writing his name that way, with such simplicity, carried a weight no legal document ever could. It was the first time she put into words what had been growing, silently all along. And to Nathan, that said everything. It didn't matter how long it would take. He had already made up his mind. From the moment she tugged on his coat, Sierra had become part of his life. The weekend began with clear skies and a light breeze drifting through the penthouse balcony. Nathan was making pancakes in the kitchen while Sierra, still in her pajamas, was sketching on another page of her notebook. The TV played it barely. Audible volume, and her doll rested on the couch under a neatly folded blanket. It was as if the whole space had learned to slow down, responding to her presence with less stiffness. Nathan set the table with colorful plates, sliced fruit, maple syrup, and cloth napkins. When he called Sierra, she came running, still holding her pencil, her face lit up with anticipation. She sat without hesitation and asked, "Is this like a hotel breakfast?" Nathan laughed. "Almost. Except here. You can go back for seconds as many times as you want." She served herself carefully, and between bites, she told him about a dream she had of a park full of dogs. and how one of them taught her doll to dance after breakfast. Nathan suggested a trip to Central Park. It was a simple outing, but a simply necessary one. Sierra laced up her new sneakers, put on a light jacket, and tied her hair back with one of the colorful elastics she'd chosen at the store. She carried her doll in one arm and her notebook in the other. They walked side by side along the park trails, passing grassy fields, listening to street performers, and watching dogs run freely in the designated areas. Sierra was captivated by everything: squirrels climbing trees, soap bubbles floating in the air, children kicking balls with their parents. They sat on a wooden bench near a lake, and she quickly drew a scene. Two figures dressed like them, sitting in front of a duck. Nathan looked and smiled. "Is that us?" "Of course," she replied. "And the duck is the security guard." He laughed louder this time. "The nicest one we've ever had." On the way back, Sierra started asking questions about school again. She wanted to know if the desks were like the ones in cartoons, if she could bring colored pencils in her backpack, and whether teachers allowed kids to make friends during lunch. Nathan answered patiently, explaining that every school was different, but that he'd find one where she could feel comfortable. "Can I pick my backpack?" she asked, her eyes sparkling. "Yes, and your pencil case too." Once home, Nathan gathered a few documents and opened his laptop. It was time to move forward with the legal matters. While Sierra took a bath, he typed an email to his lawyer confirming his intent to formally request temporary custody. It wasn't about impulse anymore, or just helping for a while. It was about commitment, about being present, about understanding that she needed more than just shelter. That evening, they had dinner together on the balcony. Nathan lit small candles on the table and reheated a simple dish of rice, vegetables, and grilled chicken. Sierra stared at the darkening sky as she ate, her eyes fixed on one particularly bright star. Mom used to say that when a star shines really bright, it means someone's thinking of us. Double quotes. Nathan swallowed hard. "Then I think someone's thinking of you right now." She smiled without saying anything. Later, as they were getting ready for bed, Sierra paused in the doorway of the guest room. "Tonight I'll try to stay here the whole night. That's fine. Remember, the door stays open." She nodded and walked in. Nathan stood at the door for a moment, watching as she arranged her doll beside the pillow, pulled the blanket up, and closed her eyes. Then he turned off the main light, left the nightstand lamp on, and went to his own room. But sleep didn't come easily. Decisions had to be made, and they could no longer be postponed. The next morning, Nathan was awakened by the doorbell. He glanced at the clock. It was just after 9. He threw on a t-shirt and answered the door. A delivery man handed over an envelope from the lawyer. Inside were the forms to apply for temporary custody, a list of recommendations, and a cover letter with instructions. He sat at the table and began reading through everything carefully. Sierra appeared moments later, her hair tousled, wearing an oversized t-shirt as pajamas. Who was it? Documents. Important ones? Very. She pulled out a chair and started coloring a new page. "Are you working today?" "A little. Just here." The silence between them returned, but it was no longer awkward. It had grown into something familiar. Nathan filled out the forms. Sierra drew. And from time to time, they glanced at each other like they had made an agreement that didn't need to be spoken. Later that afternoon, Nathan printed the completed forms, placed them in a blue folder, and set it next to the phone. Then he prepared a light snack: toast, fruit, and warm milk. Sierra helped set the table. They sat and ate quietly until she asked, "If I stay, do I have to change my name?" Nathan paused, thinking, "You don't have to change anything. Only what you want. Then can I be Sierra Cole?" The question wasn't a demand. It was a quiet hope. He smiled softly. "If that's what you want one day, I think it would suit you." She didn't say anything more. But that night, when she taped another drawing to the hallway wall, she wrote in colored pencil, Nathan and Sierra Cole's house. And when he saw it, he didn't correct her. He just stood there for a few seconds before turning off the lights. Because, deep down, that's exactly what the house was becoming. The week began under a cloudy sky and mild temperatures. Nathan took the morning to review all the documents related to the custody process once more. He organized everything into a folder with dividers, separating medical records, school information, and a written account of how he had met Sierra. He was determined to submit the request as clearly as possible, though he knew there were still unanswered questions. Meanwhile, Sierra was playing with colored pencils on the living room floor. She had drawn a house with yellow windows, a child at the window, and a man in a suit standing next to a bicycle. When Nathan walked by and complimented the drawing, she said, "That's us." "On vacation?" He smiled. "I think we could use one, even if we haven't really started anything yet." Sierra giggled and asked him to play music. A soft instrumental playlist filled the room, washing over them in quiet, gentle waves. Around noon, Nathan made an important call to the city's Child Services Department. A caseworker answered and walked him through the initial steps for a formal case assessment. He explained everything clearly: the encounter at the station, the absence of known family members, the days that followed, and his intention to file an official request for temporary custody. On the other end, the agent asked him to appear in person with the girl within 48 hours for an initial evaluation. Nathan wrote down the address, the name of the caseworker, and the list of documents he needed to bring. When he hung up, he took a deep breath. The next step now had a date. He had to tell Sierra. He sat beside her on the rug and spoke calmly. "Tomorrow we're going to talk to some people. They'll want to know how you're doing. But I'll be with you the whole time." Sierra asked only one thing: "Are they going to send me away?" Nathan answered firmly, "No one is sending you anywhere without talking to me." That same afternoon, Nathan called his lawyer, Samuel Hayes, a man with a calm voice and experience in adoption and foster care cases. Nathan updated him on the situation, gave details about the scheduled visit, and received guidance on how to handle the conversation without oversharing or leaving gaps. Samuel promised to support the process, even from a distance, and said he would send a letter of support to strengthen Nathan's position. Nathan thanked him and turned his attention back to Sierra, who was now drawing a rocket. "Would you like to go to space?" he asked with a smile. "Maybe, but only if you come too." He laughed and pulled up a chair beside her. "Let's start with something a little closer. How about ice cream before dinner, just for today?" She beamed, her smile no longer as guarded as it had been in those early days. It was in those small permissions that their bond grew stronger. One step at a time, always at her pace. Later that day, Nathan took her to a small local ice cream shop. They each picked a different flavor and sat outside on the sidewalk to watch the street activity. Sierra ate slowly, holding the cup with both hands. "Do you think I'll get to stay here forever?" she asked, more like a thought spoken aloud than a real question. Nathan looked at her, considering how to respond. "I'm doing everything I can to make that happen. And so far, no one has said we can't." She nodded and went back to her ice cream. When they finished, they walked home, passing a bookstore where she paused to admire a window display of illustrated books. "Can we come back here someday?" "Of course. You can even pick one as a gift after tomorrow's visit." She smiled without saying anything else. And the walk back to the building happened in silence, but a different kind. A calmer one. As if the idea of staying no longer felt so uncertain. That night, Nathan laid out the clothes she would wear the next day: a blue dress with small floral details, her new shoes, and a simple hair clip. "Everything's ready," he said, folding the dress carefully. "Are you going to wait outside while I talk to them?" Sierra asked, No, we'll go in together. And I'll only say what you want me to say. She nodded and went to take a bath. Later, she appeared in the hallway wrapped in a towel, barefoot, her hair still dripping. He held out the hairbrush and waited. She sat on the rug and handed him her wet hair. Nathan brushed it slowly, carefully. It was a simple gesture, but it held more meaning than any words could convey. When he finished, she got up, put on her pajamas, and lay down on the couch. Her doll, as always, was placed right beside her. Nathan turned off the lights, leaving only a lamp on. Good night, sissy. Good night, Nathan. The next morning, she was up before the alarm. She was already sitting at the table when he came out of the bedroom, her shoes on, hair clipped with the blue beret. Today's the day? It is. Nathan made breakfast quickly, organized the document folder, and checked the time for their Uber. Sierra ate 2 slices of toast, drank her juice, and brushed her teeth without needing to be reminded. When they were ready, they headed down together. The driver was waiting in front of the building. During the ride, she held her doll tightly to her chest, her eyes on the window. Nathan noticed her breathing was a little quicker, but he didn't say anything. He just gently touched her arm, as if to say, "I'm right here." When they arrived at the social services office, the receptionist led them into a room with simple furniture and toys in the corner. A social worker entered with a kind smile, extended her hand to both of them, and said, "Let's have a little chat, okay?" Sierra looked at Nathan. He gave a small nod, and then she said, "Okay, but only if he stays." And just like that, the conversation began. Capitulo 7. The social worker conducting the interview was named Martha Ellison, a woman with a firm expression but a calm voice, choosing every word carefully as she spoke with Sierra. The conversation started slowly with simple questions about what the girl liked to do, her favorite colors, whether she had toys at home. Sierra answered softly, but without hesitation. When asked about Nathan, she simply said, "He listened to me when no one else did." Martha jotted something down on her notepad, glanced at Nathan, and continued. "Do you know why you're here today?" Sierra nodded. "To find out if I can stay." The social worker didn't correct her or try to soften the topic. She just replied, "We want to make sure you're safe." And Sierra responded naturally, "I am here." Under the table, Nathan squeezed his knee, trying to contain the wave of emotion building in his chest. Her clarity always landed like a quiet punch. After the initial conversation, Martha asked to speak with Nathan alone. Another staff member took Sierra to the room next door, where there were children's books and building blocks. Once they were alone, Martha got straight to the point. "The story you've told is consistent. The first few days with her, what you observed, how you responded. Everything suggests a bond is forming." Nathan nodded. "What I need to know now is whether you understand the consequences." He answered without looking away, "I do, and I've already made my decision." Martha made a note, asked a few more questions about the routine, the legal support he was receiving, and the contacts he'd already made. In the end, she said she would submit a favorable preliminary report, but there would still be other steps. "This child trusts you. That carries more weight than a stack of documents." When he left the room, Nathan found Sierra sitting on the floor, trying to balance 2 puzzle pieces. When she saw him, she smiled. Almost done. On the way home, the mood in the car was lighter. Nathan and Sierra talked about the drawings on the office wall, the colorful cushions, and the juice she got before they left. When they arrived, she ran ahead to the apartment door and turned the knob before he could use the key. "Is this my house too now?" He held the door and said, "Yes, and you can come in any time you want." Once inside, she set her doll on the couch, ran to the bedroom, and came back with a sheet of paper. She sat on the floor and began drawing. Curious, Nathan set the folder on the table and went to see what she was working on. It was a simple drawing, 2 stick figures holding hands with a sun above and a red heart between them. At the top of the page, in crooked letters, it read, "I want to stay." He took a deep breath, knelt down, and ran his hand through her hair. "You already are." In the days that followed, Nathan received an unannounced visit from a representative of the Child Protection Council, part of the standard procedure to assess the living environment. She stayed for nearly an hour, speaking with him, observing the apartment layout, Sierra's routine, the drawings on the fridge, and even the toys scattered on the living room rug. At the end, she gave only a few remarks and left with a reserved smile, saying she would return soon with the official report. After that, Nathan began preparing all the required paperwork more carefully: medical exams, vaccination records, school documents. Some pieces were still missing, like the mother's full background and whether there were any legal relatives, but no one had come forward. And the silence outside only made the quiet inside feel more meaningful, the slow, deliberate building of something new, fragile, but real. On a Saturday afternoon, while Sierra painted with watercolors on the balcony, Nathan received a call from his attorney. Samuel said the request for provisional custody had been officially filed, and that, considering the positive report from the social worker and the favorable impression from the home visit, the odds of approval were very high. Nathan thanked him and hung up. He looked at Sierra dipping her brush into a plastic cup and carefully applying red paint to the paper. "Looks like a flag," she said, holding it up. "Which country?" he asked. "Ours." Nathan smiled. It was hard to put into words what he felt for that little girl. There was no precise label for it, but everything about her just seemed to fit. The way she moved around the house, the drawings, the way she said his name so lightly. It was as if she was meant to be there, even if the path to it had been anything but straight. That night, after dinner, Sierra asked to sleep in the guest room again. Nathan walked her there, arranged the pillows, placed her doll beside the bed, and pulled the blanket up to her chest. "Do you want me to read you a story?" "Yes, but it has to have a happy ending." He picked a book from the ones they had bought, sat beside the bed, and began reading. She listened attentively, her eyes growing heavier by the minute. By the time he finished, she was already asleep, her breathing slow and steady, her fingers curled around the edge of the quilt. Nathan sat there for a few moments before turning off the light. Then he returned to the living room, picked up his phone, and sent a short message to the lawyer. "We're ready for whatever comes next." Because now, more than ever, he knew Sierra was part of what he wanted to build. And even though there were still challenges ahead, none of them felt bigger than what they had already overcome together. Monday dawned gray, with thick clouds covering the city and a light drizzle slipping quietly down the apartment windows. Nathan woke up early, as usual, and made coffee while checking the latest emails from the lawyer. The response hadn't arrived yet, but he knew it was only a matter of days. Sierra appeared shortly after, her hair loose and messy, wearing the oversized t-shirt she slept in and dragging her new slippers across the floor. "I woke up to thunder," she said, picking up the mug of milk he had just placed on the table. Nathan smiled. "That's just the sky stretching." She let out a little laugh and sat down, still drowsy, her hands wrapped around the mug. The rain tapped gently against the glass like a soft song. The apartment felt like it was resting too, adjusting to this new way of life. After breakfast, Sierra helped put away the silverware, sorted the colored pencils into their box, and organized her latest drawings. Some she placed in a folder, others she folded carefully and clipped together. "I think I want to do an exhibit," she said, pointing to the empty hallway wall. Nathan crouched down to meet her gaze. "We can hang them all here, and whoever comes to visit will get to see them." She nodded enthusiastically. Together, they picked the first drawings and taped them up in a straight line. When they finished, Sierra crossed her arms and studied the result. "Looks like an art gallery." Nathan laughed. "That's exactly what it is." The way she was gradually making the space her own, through small, steady gestures, was transforming every corner of the apartment. That hallway had become a wall of memories, and each picture taped up was proof of something growing. She was staying up by mid-afternoon. The phone finally rang. It was Samuel. The lawyer's voice was upbeat but measured. "The preliminary ruling came in. It's favorable. The judge authorized the move forward with provisional custody, and the next step is just paperwork. Nothing too complicated." Nathan thanked him, asked a few technical questions, and hung up. When he turned around, Sierra was standing in the doorway, holding a drawing of a tree. "Was it about me?" "Yes. Good things." She walked to the couch and sat beside him. "So what now?" Nathan took a breath. "Now, it's almost official." She looked at him for a few seconds, as if weighing the meaning of those words. Then, she simply leaned in and rested her shoulder against his arm. "Then I can draw us in a forever home?" He wrapped his arm around her back. "Yes, you should." In the days that followed, their routine settled into a new rhythm. Nathan adjusted his work schedule, took most meetings by video call, and cut back on outside obligations. He wanted to be present, not just physically, but emotionally too. Sierra, in turn, began creating her own habits, waking at the same time, having breakfast with her doll beside her, helping fold laundry, and making grocery lists using pictures instead of words. It was a kind of seamless adaptation, as if she had always belonged there. Sometimes, when Nathan stepped out briefly, she would ask if he'd be long. "Just a quick errand. Want me to text when I'm on my way back?" And she'd nod. But by the time he returned, she was already by the door, drawing or reading, as if she had always known he'd come back. One afternoon, Nathan suggested something new. "Want to see the school that might be yours?" Sierra's eyes widened. "Today? We can just walk by. See what it looks like." "Only if you want to," she agreed. She put on her coat, grabbed her doll, and off they went. They walked a few blocks to the local public school. It was modest but well-maintained. Children were streaming out, parents chatting on the sidewalk, and a colorful bulletin board near the entrance greeted visitors with cheerful messages. Sierra observed everything in silence. When a girl ran past them with a purple backpack, she commented, "I like that backpack." Nathan crouched beside her. "There's one like that at the store near our place. We can check it out later." She didn't answer, but the slight smile at the corner of her mouth said more than words. She was ready to imagine a future. And maybe, for the first time, that future included stability. On the way back, Sierra walked slowly, watching the trees still wet from the previous day's rain. When they reached the building, she raced up the stairs and opened the door before Nathan. She went straight to the fridge, pulled a new drawing from her folder, and stuck it beside the others. This one was different. It had details. A couch with two people, a bookshelf, an open window, and a coffee cup on the table. In the corner, written in big, colorful letters, "Our home." Nathan stood still, staring at it for a moment. That wasn't just child's art. It was a kind of declaration of permanence, of belonging. He walked over, placed a hand gently on her head, and said, "Thank you for staying." And she, without turning around, replied as if the words had already been agreed upon between them. "You stayed first." Nathan woke to sunlight streaming into the living room. Sierra was lying on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, a book resting open on her chest. It was Saturday, and he had promised they'd do something special, anything she wanted. As he walked over to wake her, She slowly opened her eyes and smiled sleepily. "Can we go to the park?" He nodded, and she jumped off the couch like she'd been ready for hours. While they had breakfast, she started sketching on a napkin what she wanted to do. Ice cream, swings, ducks at the pond. Nathan watched each detail with warmth in his chest, struck by how naturally it all flowed. He was still learning to accept that even without a biological bond, this connection was the most real thing he had ever known. Sierra filled the house, the days, and his thoughts with the same ease she used to fill her drawings out at the park. She ran straight to the swings and begged him to push her higher. Then they fed the ducks, sat on the grass for a simple picnic, and shared a bottle of juice. Nathan glanced around at the other families. Kids running, parents distracted by their phones or chatting with each other. But he and Sierra were completely locked into their own world. When she laid her head on his lap and started making up stories based on the shapes in the clouds, he knew he'd never be able to walk away. This wasn't just about protection or responsibility. It was love. Quiet, everyday, immeasurable love. Back at home, she drew the entire day on a single sheet. The swings, the ducks, the snacks, the shadow of a tree. She taped it next to the last one on the hallway wall. "It's turning into a book," Nathan nodded. "A very important book." The following Monday, Nathan got a call from the lawyer. The custody hearing had been scheduled for 2 weeks. From then, it was the final step, the most awaited and the most decisive. He hung up with a mix of anticipation and relief. Everything was on track, but he couldn't shake off the fear of a sudden turn. He needed to be ready. He began organizing documents more rigorously, sought out a child psychologist to make sure Sierra was receiving the proper emotional support, and wrote a short statement to present to the judge, just in case. Not a rehearsed speech, just simple words to explain what she had changed in his life, how much she was a part of him now. As he typed, Sierra came up behind him and rested her chin on his shoulder. "Are you writing about me?" "Yes." "Can I read it later?" "You can, but I'll show it to you first." That week, Sierra started having nightmares. She'd wake up in the middle of the night scared she'd be taken away, dreaming of doors slamming shut and unfamiliar voices calling her name. Nathan started sleeping with his bedroom door open, and every time she cried out, he'd show up with a glass of water and sit by her bed until she fell back asleep. One night, she whispered, "If I have to leave, will you come with me?" He laid down beside her, pulled the blanket over both of them, and answered with his eyes closed, "We'll stay together, no matter where." And he stayed there, holding her hand until morning. It wasn't easy. Her fear was a shadow of her past, a product of the instability and abandonment still buried deep in her memory. But Nathan knew there was only one cure for that: consistency and presence. Every single day, the Sunday before the hearing, Nathan took Sierra to a bookstore where a storyteller was doing a live reading. She was enchanted. She sat in the middle of the other kids, eyes wide with wonder, joining in when invited, laughing at just the right moments. Afterward, they picked out 2 picture books together and a new notebook for her drawings. On the way back, Nathan stopped by the cafe next door and ordered hot chocolate for both of them. Sierra dipped her cookie into the drink and said, "Best day ever." He smiled. "You say that every weekend." "Because it's always true." Back home, she ran to tape another drawing in the hallway. It was a heart with 2 names, one on each side. Can it stay there forever? It can, and it will, because that was her home now. And he, with or without any signed papers, had already been her dad every day. The night before the hearing, Nathan made a simple dinner with all of Sierra's favorite foods. She set the table with colorful napkins, lit a small candle in the middle, and asked, "Is tonight like Christmas Eve?" He laughed. "Kind of. It's a big night." They ate, talking about books, their plans for the coming week, even which dress she might wear the next day. Nathan laid out his own clothes with care, double-checked all the papers, and made sure everything was in order. Before bed, he read Sierra's story like he always did, but this time she asked for 2, just to be sure I sleep. After she drifted off, he stood in the doorway of her room for a few minutes, just watching her. He knew tomorrow would change. Everything. But truthfully, everything had already changed the day she walked into that train station. The hearing was just a formality, because the love that had been settled long ago. The morning of the hearing started early. Nathan had prepared everything the night before, but he still woke before his alarm. He got dressed slowly, as if every button fastened a thought, a worry, an expectation. The smell of fresh coffee filled the apartment as he made Sierra's favorite breakfast waffles with honey and thin slices of apple. She appeared minutes later, still groggy from sleep, but already dressed in the outfit she had picked out. Her hair neatly done with a delicate headband. She sat at the table quietly, watching him closely. "Are you nervous?" He took a deep breath and gave a half smile. "I think a little." She chewed slowly and then said, "Me too." It was. Not just any day. Not because there would be a judge, lawyers, and official documents, but because what was already true in every gesture would now need to be recognized on paper too. On the way to the courthouse, Sierra held tightly to his hand in the back seat of the cab. Nathan tried to stay calm, but his heart sped up with each block. When they arrived, they were greeted by Samuel, the attorney, who led them to the waiting room. Other families sat there too, each with their own story waiting for closure. Sierra rested her head on his shoulder, her eyes curious and alert. "Do you think they'll let us?" Nathan gave her hand a gentle squeeze. "I think so, because we already are a family." When their names were called, they walked into the hearing room together. It was a simple room, but the weight of the moment made everything feel bigger. The judge greeted them kindly, listened to the attorney, read the documents, and asked few direct questions. When he looked at Sierra, he spoke gently. "Do you like living with Nathan?" She replied with a firm yes. The hearing lasted just over 20 minutes, but to Nathan, it felt like a lifetime. When the judge gave a favorable decision and granted permanent custody, there was a brief silence before Samuel nodded to confirm it was final. Sierra looked up at Nathan and whispered, "Did we win?" He answered with a wide smile, "We won." She hugged him tightly, arms wrapped around him with everything she had. Outside the courthouse, they took a photo in front of the building. Sierra posed with her arms raised like a gold medalist. Then they went to celebrate at the restaurant she always asked about, the one Nathan used to say was reserved for special occasions. So this is a special occasion? The most special of all. She ordered mac and cheese and a dessert with chocolate sauce. He toasted with apple juice. And in that toast, there was more than just celebration. There was gratitude and belonging. In the days that followed, life settled into a new rhythm. The apartment, once arranged with cautious care, now adapted fully to Sierra's presence. Clothes hanging in the bathroom, books scattered across the couch, toys overflowing from boxes that no longer fit under the bed. Nathan began referring to her as "my daughter" in conversations with friends and colleagues. Some got emotional, others offered congratulations. He simply said that everything made more sense now. Sierra, in turn, became more confident. She still asked about the past, but with less fear. She wanted to know about his childhood, what school was like for him, what he liked to draw when he was her age. And when he answered, she listened like it was a rare story. Sometimes she'd interrupt just to say, "So we're alike." In that home, Sierra was no longer a child under temporary care. She was a daughter. She was the present. And the future, still uncertain in many ways, felt steadier with her in it, sketching what was to come in bold strokes and colors she chose for herself. With time, other steps followed. Permanent school enrollment, updated vaccinations, health. Insurance, small bureaucratic things that Nathan handled carefully, like someone finally fitting every piece of the puzzle into place. But none of that defined their relationship. What did were the ordinary days. The way she called him Dad without thinking, the meals shared without fuss, the bedtime stories she now picked herself. One random Saturday, Sierra showed up with a new drawing. It was the two of them, side by side, with a speech bubble above that read, "Happy Family." Nathan placed it at the center of the hallway wall where everyone could see it. And when a coworker later asked why he seemed different lighter, he simply replied, "I feel whole." Because that's what Sierra had brought him, wholeness. A love that didn't come from blood, but rooted itself deep in the soul. And stayed. The end. So, what did you think of this story? Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel to keep enjoying stories like this one. See you next time.